Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast, and happy Super Bowl Sunday. Woke up, rolled out of bed, figured I would record an episode before I have to get to work cleaning up to host a little Super Bowl get together later today. I don't want to drag on a particular topic as much as I wrote it in my notes that I have in front of me here. Only because I want to strike a balance. I want to talk about things that need to be at the forefront, but at the same time, I could only beat a dead horse so many times as well. And so, with that, and I do have some other side points as well to change the direction and the tone of this episode as I near the midway point or the end. So, bear with me if you're tired about talking of a certain thing, but it's the only thing that's really been dominating the news cycle lately, and that has been the second large wave of heavily redacted files. And why is it that after, I mean, I know why it is, it's obviously a redundant question, but why is it that after we get a huge info dump, such as what the files are, that we don't really band together and rally outside the federal IRS buildings, right? Why aren't we even rallying outside of the homes of the people who, again, allegedly, based on the very heavily, poorly redacted files, are the ones eating and, violating children? Again, that's what the files are saying. This isn't me rattling about an Alex Jones conspiracy theory. I'm taking what was laid out in the files at the surface. Why can't that bring us together? And I think the reason why that is that the propaganda has been so effective in dividing the individuals of this country, so much so that we can't even view the deployment of federal agents to a certain area, poorly trained federal agents to a certain area who are handling a situation so poorly. We can't view that objectively as a bad thing. It has to be viewed in the context of, if you vote left, you hate it, and if you vote right, you support it. Blindly, by the way. You can't view any nuance. You can't view any facts that may detract or take away from your side's beliefs. You are fully entrenched, and there is no pulling you out into no man's land. There is no poking your head up above into the line of fire to maybe sort of see what's going on and what the other side is saying. There's simply no coming together. The propaganda has fully divided us, and I think that now that there are so many people at so many levels of power across so many years that have been caught up in doing some of the worst things imaginable that we can really imagine humans doing, and we're not doing anything about it, I do believe that represents a death knell for a civilization. And to quote Lysander Spooner, "But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist." And that is obviously from one of my favorite pieces of reading, No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority. But here we are. The division has happened. The conquering seems to have happened now that we are paying taxes and blindly obeying some really immoral laws from some of the worst people among us, and nobody will do anything about it. The bell tolls for we. I think it's a huge bummer, and unless we take responsibility for what we've done in this, for entrusting these people, entrusting the system, not demanding more transparency, not demanding more accountability and control, and really taking that up upon ourselves to make sure, rather than trusting the state to police itself, until we take responsibility, until we take ownership. And again, that's sort of that spiritual revolution sort of vibe that Tolstoy is putting out, until we take the onus on ourselves and say we fucked up, we gave up too much to these people, and they took what we gave them and they ran with it. Until that happens, there will be no change. And until a lot of things happen, there won't be any meaningful change. But the needle will not even begin to budge unless we sort of take the burden on our shoulders. You know, the entire reason why we surrendered so many freedoms and comforts to government was to have the illusion of safety and comfort and freedom and leisure. We outsourced some of the most important things in our lives to some of the worst people among us. And now we are sitting and living with that consequence. And so, again, until a generation comes along or enough people come along to say, we'll take that, we'll own that, we'll bear that burden, you know, we'll live with that weight, understand it's a consequence for our actions and how we've been living and our morals, the needle of where things are today, it simply won't budge. And to further sort of elaborate on my stance on this is that the mere existence of these files, the entire reason why the files were sealed, hidden, not released, and this isn't just speculation, this is just a facts, you know, spoken by many other people, and the entire reason why they were redacted and why it took an act of Congress to release them was that these files were being held by the DOJ for a criminal investigation. Thus why they're so afraid, or the whole talking point about not compromising, you know, ongoing investigations or anything. And even so, even after they've had their stab at releasing and removing files that they accidentally released, or redacting files that they forgot to redact after like releasing them, the amount of shit that's in them, the amount of just partial information that we have to warrant an investigation further into somebody, to warrant an arrest for questioning, or search warrants, is so overwhelming. How have there not been any arrests? How have there not been any doors getting knocked down of these people? We have seen the state arrest people for business cards. Remember, the company name escapes me now, but they formed their business cards as sort of like a template to, you know, drill that third hole in the receiver. And the ATF classified this company's business card as an actual machine gun, a little square card. They called that a machine gun. And just with that change of definition that no one voted on, that nobody had any say on, they just took it upon themselves to change the definition. They kicked down the doors of these guys and they arrested them. People who have simply been picketing or protesting, practicing their First Amendment rights, not even talking about the Alex Preddy thing. We've seen the state arrest them for disrupting just nonsense, making up fake sort of charges and saying things that they were doing that they really weren't. They've picked people up and arrested them for that. Even like we went over this last week, the chick who was just falsely identified on a flock camera, they picked her up without any real vetting, without any confirmation. It was enough just for one cop to look at a camera, make a wrong guess, and pick this woman up, completely violating her rights, throwing her in the back of a cop car, taking her in. I would like to see half as much effort, that amount of effort, to take half of it and apply it to all the shit we're seeing on these files, because there's a lack of equality in the treatment here. And at the very minimum, that should be obvious, you know, beyond all the horrors that they have brought to the surface. There's a very clear inequality of treatment that's happening between the political class and the tax cattle. And the lack of outrage from that just sort of gets thrown onto the pile of the things that we should be very concerned about there being a lack of outrage and sort of banding together on. But like another example of like just to further speak to how entrenched we are in this left and right shit, the fact that these sat sealed, these files sat in a box in a basement somewhere in a federal building for as long as they did, and knowing what's on them, no one had even heard about these things outside of the scope of really sort of sketchy news sources or podcasts, is proof that they sat with several administrations, many presidencies, and they had no interest in bringing them to the surface. They had no interest in seeking justice for those who were violated, despite the campaign promises, despite the appeal to to you, that they are like you, that you can get a beer with them, that they're interested in your safety and just and all this other horse shit. It's, take all of that into consideration, and then let's go back to the 1700s and let's have a chat about taxation without representation then, right? These aren't public servants that are interested in serving you in any way, shape, or form. And then I could even go back to several episodes, and I've alluded to it in other episodes as well, but like, and this is just, part of taking the onus on me and on the people around me, right? Like, or just my community. I'm not going to tell people what to do, obviously, but what's the point? Like, what are we doing? If we exist in this sort of sphere, this sort of space, what is the point in training, in acquiring guns, in acquiring kit? What's the goal? And I'm banning the word community, I think, from this point on in my own lexicon, because clearly whatever generation of gun culture that was going on, everyone said it's focused on community building. We're moving away from a lot of the consumerism sort of bullshit and the big gun tuber influencer, and I'll get into that a little bit later. We're moving away from that into what was being called as like the community building iteration of gun culture. Well, that's clearly failed. Outside of online pockets, which don't really count as community because, as we know, interaction online isn't real human interaction. It's fallen short, and or it's just not moving fast enough. So we got to find a different word for community building. It's got to have some teeth, I think, because it needs to have real purpose. And at the current timeline, I don't believe that there's a bigger threat to us as individuals than the state. I think history has shown that will always be the case, but being boiled alive analogy, the temperature's never been higher than what it is right now, I think. And as more things are revealed, even though they're half-assedly revealed, even though they're not fully revealed to us, it should be very, very clear where the evil resides, who the bad guys are, and whatever you're going to build, whoever you're going to bring together, whatever your goals are, community doesn't really encompass what I think the mission statement of that thing is, right? Now, I'm not saying maybe I should wind that back a little bit, because you have to live for yourself. Obviously, you have to do what's best for yourself, your family, your loved ones, your community, right? That doesn't necessarily mean coming together to topple a government, right? Don't die a needless or a useless death. But I do think when you're building that thing, don't feed the machine that's actively working to crush you, right? Like, don't go out collecting people who are just going to pander to this tyrannical, crushing welfare state that we have today. You're probably going to want to surround your people with an understanding of like that is evil. I'm going to do everything in my power to not pay taxes to that, to not obey the immoral laws of that, to completely disassociate myself from that. And then when the time is right, and through acts that still ensure my safety, actively work against that to prove to others and to myself even more that we can live without it. And I think that's the point of community building. That's the point of decentralization. That's the point of balkanization. It's to separate yourselves from that and to not feed it, to not rely on it, and to show other people that they don't need to as well. So I don't know what word for community that has a little more teeth than that word can be used in place of it. I'll word tool that. But community's banned in my mind from now on, because it has fallen well short, as I see people even in this sphere who are really more so grifters, fully gagging and doing tricks on the propaganda of the state. So community's done. It's out. We need something new. Another thing I noted when it came to propaganda, let's just address that again. When Biden was very clearly either being replaced by a body double as he was losing his mind on television and falling off bicycles, we can all recall, I know we all have goldfish memory now, but Sharp as Attack. Sharp as Attack was the Control-C, Control-V quote that was used by every news outlet, by every politician who went in front of a camera or a microphone to help soothe the worried minds of the people glued to their televisions, um, watching their favorite president or their most voted for president literally pass away in front of their eyes. But you were told to ignore your own eyes, to ignore exactly what you were seeing, despite, and again, every time a president goes on TV, it's like one of the most overproduced things you can possibly imagine. It's all rehearsed. Most of it can be edited. And even still, we all got to watch a stroked out geriatric man basically be forced to perform like a sick circus animal as he was dying. And everyone could tell he was very clearly not doing very well. But nonetheless, you were told that you're an idiot. He's sharp as a tack, sharp as a tack, sharp as a tack, over and over and over again for months on end. Everyone knew that was horseshit unless you were one of the most devout cultists to the state. The exact same side of that coin that's happening right now is, and I quote, the most transparent FBI in history, or FBI has been interchanged with the most transparent administration in history. Go look at any screenshot of like the pages of the files that have been released. There are entire pages that are just black squares. These are so heavily redacted. The names of people that are implicit, or the names of people that are included on emails, where some of the most horrific things are being discussed, are blacked out. Things were released and then deleted because, again, they realized they accidentally exposed somebody in the administration, in a release. So this alone, forget the fact that, oh, by the way, your president was the first president in history to bomb 8 countries in his first year as president. That not really transparent about that, are we, or how that's really American first, but we won't get into that. Just this incident and how poorly it's been handled, and how not transparent the files are, despite this being the main election or the main campaign promise, is horseshit. And again, nobody buys this unless you are fully indoctrinated by the propaganda, by the cult that is the state. It's no different. And this goes back to what I was saying in the last episode or the one before, where everything you hate about me is you, and everything I hate about you is me. Again, you're so entrenched and you're so set on just holding the hammer to smash against the other side when it comes to an election year, when it comes to anything having to do with the state. First of all, you're not even realizing that nothing you're achieving through voting or putting these people in power is helping you in any way. But you are no different than the other side. You are 99.9% the same. And that 0.1% that's different comes down to your feelings about little tiny things that these people are going to take to the House and the Senate to vote on, and whether or not it actually goes through is a whole nother thing. And oh, by the way, no one's really going to benefit at the end of the day either, right? But one side's guns is another side's abortion, and then you can take either one of those things and just it's the exact same thing. You're looking at a mirror, and I'm not really sure how much more clear I can make that, since they're really no different. But, and maybe this will help put it into perspective, but probably not. This is just an observation I saw recently as the Olympic Games kicked off. Opening ceremonies in Milan took place on Thursday, I want to say. Or maybe I think it was Thursday. But Team USA walked out to a mixed crowd reaction, it seemed. A little bit of cheering, a little bit of jeering, some boos here and there. Not a definitive, it was probably mostly positive, but it wasn't an overall positive reaction that you saw most other countries receive. Okay. And then you saw J.D. Vance and his wife and the entire state of Israel get booed into oblivion. Rightfully so. You've earned that. One being a fully tyrannical military state, and the other just being one of the biggest welfare recipients and drains on a society. So boo them to hell. I don't really care. But really just looking at the reaction to USA being announced and walking out, do you think that's your or my fault? Do you think any individual living here caused the global perception of this country to decline on the world scale? Again, I'll remind you, I don't know anybody in Palestine. I don't know anybody in Iran. I don't know anybody in Russia, China, North Korea. I don't know any individuals over there. I only know I hate their governments, right? But I can't say that I know a single individual from any of those countries, and I certainly don't have any opinions uh, on them, whether I love or I hate them. And same goes for them. They don't know me. So if you believe that the people who are voting for left or for right politicians or policies are the reason why the global perception of America is somewhat tarnished, again, you're gagging on and doing tricks on the propaganda of the state. Nobody outside of the state has that much influence and power. You ain't in that club, like I have said over and over and over again, because we're trying to build nations again, because we're trying to conquer different countries and take natural resources by kidnapping presidents and threatening Greenland and bombing Iran for Israel, and bombing 8 countries in the first year of a presidency for the first time in history. That is why the world does not like us. It's not because you or I. It's not for you. And the best example here, none of this is anything you voted for, by the way. All of the reasons why the perception of America has declined were actions taken by the president, were taken by the state, and were things that you did not vote for. These were not campaign promises. Do with that what you will. I think I've driven that tack home. A piece of good news, though, to aid with the shifting of the tone and of the direction here. Mitch McConnell was admitted into the hospital with flu-like symptoms, and given his age, I will drink to that. T's and P's for the old turtle-looking fuck. But anyways, and onto the consumery sort of thing. SHOT Show happened, and I'm not even really sure if anyone noticed. It seemed to be a very quiet passing of SHOT Show this year. And I think that could be attributed to the era of big name influencers sort of dying or being dead. You have less sort of theatrical, performative gun tubers that are around. And the ones that are around, they're not as produced. Or maybe not as, maybe that's the wrong word. They're not as scripted, let's just say. Like, for example, Dirty Kid, the production value is superb. And, obviously there's a good amount of editing that goes on. It's a very well produced channel, and they put out great stuff. But it's not what Grand Thumb is and what used to be, right? And I think that is a good thing. And speaking of Mr. Thumb, I think he really can be attributed to the start of this decline of that sort of gunfluencer personality, and rightfully so, given what happened. But I've always said, and I think this is a good thing, because I've always said you should never worship or attack, for that matter, individuals, people. Instead, you should aim for ideals, because people are flawed. And when we really hone in or take aim at someone, at a person, and not what they stand for, not what their ideals are, not what, not what they're saying, we really do miss the big picture. We end up zooming in a little too far. And as if, again, if we're going to stay on the topic of Mr. Thumb, as if he wasn't proof enough to release the files this year, like I mentioned, should already have sent that point home. And going back to the files, I know I said I was done shifting gears, but Mr. Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, the man who is accredited with revealing to us what the media and government relationship really is, a man who he coined the term manufactured consent, which now, unfortunately, given his relationship to JE, has a different definition, it would seem. But nonetheless, he was, obviously his photograph with Epstein on his private jet, and several other times. There's documented cases of money being exchanged between the two. And, before this revelation, of course, I admired Mr. Chomsky for his work before all of this, obviously. But what I really liked most and talked about was his concept of manufactured consent, the original concept, obviously. And I would simply just credit him with being the man who coined it, who discovered it, who wrote about it, who made us aware of this. And this is obviously important because, and as flawed as Mr. Malcolm X was, he would say, the truth is the truth, no matter who says it. I do believe Mr. Chomsky got the manufactured consent idea correct. And I think that's observable and it's proven very true before and even after his founding of it. So I would simply say, in passing, when I'm bringing up the topic and explaining the topic of it, I would accredit him with the discovery and sort of dissemination of the topic, or of the term and idea that is manufactured consent. But I wasn't hanging pictures of Gnome in my living room as if he were the king. I wasn't buying shirts and stickers of his face, and I wasn't, worshiping him with any fanfare because I just liked him personally. And obviously, if I did, that would open me up to a lot of issues right now, given what happened, as it should with anyone. This is just proof that worshiping people 100% of the time is a bad idea. It's never going to work out. And that goes to obviously the pillars of this show as well. But all that really to say, and I guarantee you didn't have it on your bingo card that we were going to tie Noam Chomsky and Garantham together in one episode, but we did that somehow. All that to say, really, nothing came out of SHOT Show that really caught my eye this year. And perhaps this was a year of stagnation in the sphere, and maybe I'm wrong, but just an observation. Could be due to the Trump slump, people feeling a little comfortable that gun rights are safe, even though, given how the Preddy situation was handled and how Bondi's trying to form the gun registry by bullying certain entities that have sort of really looked to nurture and preserve gun rights. Maybe it's an affordability issue. Maybe it's a tariffs issue. Maybe people are having trouble importing certain things. I don't know. Again, just speculation. But there have been no shortage of dog shit products floating around that we have to sort through, and we don't need any more of that. So maybe this is a good thing. Maybe a year of just taking inventory and getting a heat check of where people and things are in the market is a good thing for us. Me personally, after building out that a more capable 308, I've scaled back greatly, and I'm now just focusing on ammo and training when it makes sense and when it's affordable, while keeping the door open, or cracked perhaps, for a thermal of some sort, as I'm, selling things that have just been burning a hole in my safe or in some of my gear closets. I have a lot of things piled up that I haven't used over a couple of years. So now I've just sort of said, you know what, start selling this stuff. I can use the money, and if a trade opportunity makes sense to pick up a thermal in the process, we'll do that. RH25 seems to be the end all be all if you had to pick one. Realistically, it's probably going to be like an AGM rattler of some sorts. After talking to a few guys in my group who have rattlers and like them a lot, that seems to be a good balance between sort of affordability and capability. There's that FMP 13, that little thermal scanning red dot, as well as like the SIG Echo that I could find for, $800 to $500 area used. Those don't really have the zoom capability that I think I would like out of a thermal. I think one that can be used as like a handheld like scanning device you can throw in a pouch, or like as a clip on in front of a red dot or an LPVO at a low magnification is really what I'm after. So a rattler type device probably is going to fit the budget and capability need that I would like, but that was a little more elaboration that was needed on that. But yeah, all that to say, nothing came out of Vegas this year that really caught my eye at all. I saw like a really weird pistol. I think it came from the same company that made the Alien. Saw some more 2011 models from companies that I'm not going to buy from. Yeah, I really wasn't thrilled at anything that I saw from brands or people who went and, recorded themselves and shared what they were seeing on the floor. The only thing, again, outside of a thermal, I know I just said I'm keeping the door open for a thermal, but as I get more seriously into long range, my goal this year to shoot up to 1,000 yards, I think is what the bar I set for myself, which I know going to be very difficult on an 18-inch 308, but still, aim for the stars and whatnot. Arkin is making a laser rangefinder at $600, and it's not going to have the applied ballistics tech that the Vortex model will have, but again, the Vortex model starts at like $1,500, $1,400. So for almost half of that, less than half of that even, you can have something that's going to do 75 to 80% of the job anyways, it looks like. And the ballistic calculators on phones now are so good. And with some additional understanding of your tools, you're probably going to be able to make up for the lack of the applied ballistics application within the unit. So I would say that $900 price difference really makes me lean towards Arkin in that sense. I forget what it's called. I'll have to look it up and throw it in post here. Uh, and that wasn't necessarily a SHOT Show revelation. I've seen that getting teased in posts on Instagram for a few months, even leading up to SHOT. So that's one thing I am looking forward to, because there's like an airsoft sort of version of the Vortex thing. But again, it has been proven. I doubt it's going to stand up to any beating in the field, or continual sort of shock from being shot over and over and over again. So for that reason, holding out for the Arkin unit, because it seems to be solid. And again, that $900 price differential between the sort of standard to what that is, it seems to be more than justifiable. So we shall see there. And then to sort of end it, on some good news. Well, not end it, but as we sort of wind things down, move into some good news corner here. I am actively chasing the American dream, if you will, that is homeownership. Got pre-approved for a loan, which really is just calling a bank or a broker or whoever and explaining to them, what you make, where you work, what you're looking for, what your debts, credit, all that are. And they'll basically say, cool, here's a letter that guarantees that you can offer up to a certain amount on a home. So that was the easy part. The hard part is looking for a home. And I say I've probably toured close to 10, 12 homes over the course of a month now. And now I will lead with, this is the quote unquote off season of home buying. The winter is the slow season. No one really wants to go look at houses in the winter. And therefore the number, or move in the winter, obviously moving sucks. So doing it in the snow and the ice where we are, not great. So the number of houses on the market are lower than what they would be in the spring and the summer. That being said, the houses that are listed are usually listed at a little bit of a discount, and people are more willing to make price cuts and accept sort of concessions. And concessions really are just at closing, the seller agrees to cover, however much in additional closing costs. So for example, looked at a house yesterday, and the seller had agreed to basically provide $5,000 worth in concessions. So at the closing table, any fees or closing costs that you have to pay, the seller would give you basically $5,000 that could just go towards that. So you're more likely to find those things while shopping in the winter. So my lease is up in May. I'm obviously looking very early, but figured, it might make sense just to see what I can get at a nice deal right now. That being said, the only house I've looked at that I really liked was way out of budget. And so what's available right now is all really, really sort of rough around the edges and still overpriced. The housing market is still way overinflated, where it was, before COVID. Obviously, we have never fully recovered from COVID in so many ways, and the housing market is just one of those things. Yes, mortgage rates are in the high fives right now, maybe low sixes, high fives. I think the rate that I'm seeing quoted most is like a 5.99%. So technically 5%, but the biggest problem is still going to be home prices. While the rates are still sort of up there, home prices have accelerated and have stayed inflated for a very long time. And there's really no reason or signal to indicate when or why they will come down, right? It's a supply and demand thing. There's not many houses on the market. Rates are very high, or historically still like a little higher if we're looking at it from like a COVID perspective. If you zoom out even further, rates are very low. But everything's, perspective matters here. Homes aren't really being built. Nobody wants to move because they're probably locked into a really low rate. And if they do want to move, and if they can stomach a new rate, where are you going to go? Even if you can stomach a new rate, and the increased price of housing, there's not as many houses listed for sale. So there's really nowhere to go. So people are sort of locked in their homes. So all this to say, it's a little hard to buy a house right now, and it probably will be for a little bit, but I persevere nonetheless, and I encourage everyone to do so as well. The hardest part is just getting started. You know, hop on Zillow. If you know someone who's a realtor, reach out to them and just start looking at houses. That's a great way to start. And then call your bank. You know, if you maybe your realtor knows a lender as well, they can refer you to that can, maybe provide some incentives and better pricing for you, and then just get pre-approved. And then you're off basically from there. But your lender, your broker, whoever you're working with who's going to be giving you your mortgage, they will be able to help you understand what you can afford, what the all-in costs are going to be, and obviously proceed to look at houses that sort of fit that budget. Because if you look at one that's outside of budget and you fall in love with it, you're going to be super bummed out. And that's what I just did. Even though I knew better, I did it anyways. But that just is what it is. And all I have to say is that, despite everything that's going on, a lot of negative news, a lot of negative trends that have been going on, you know, take care of yourself. Don't get sucked into the screen. Don't get sucked into the pit of despair, right? Like, take care of yourself. Own something. Work towards owning the biggest investment you're going to make in your life. And are you really owning it if you're paying off a loan every month? No, but you have more control over your surroundings when you quote unquote own it in this sort of context. So position yourself, learn about what you need to do to position yourself. And ask me, I'm not going to tell you I am the end all be all, but working in the sort of home space for as long as I have in the financial area, knowing as much as I do, it is something I'm very comfortable talking about. And, I'm never going to tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I did and what I know, what my thoughts are, or who to go to talk to with even more information. So my little feel good piece of advice thing for this week is, obviously enjoy the Super Bowl, have fun if that's your thing. Don't don't let the people shame you into watching. There's a lot of dorks in this sphere who have never watched sports in their life, who talk shit about people who watch sports. They're a bunch of fucking nerds. They're no fun to be around. So have fun, watch the Super Bowl, hang out with normie friends or your autistic friends. It doesn't matter. Whatever you like to do, just have fun. And then if, just look into what your goals are. What do you want to do? And take it seriously from there. There's nothing stopping you from doing what it is you want to do or who it is you want to be other than you. It's that adult freedom that people joke about, right? Like, people suddenly realize that they have like sentience when they're an adult and they're like, oh, I can have dessert for dinner sort of thing. Like, that's what this is. Like, you can flip that switch and you can start like working towards these things that maybe felt out of reach or that weren't really attainable or that weren't really what you like. Maybe you didn't see yourself a certain way before, but you want to see yourself do a certain thing or be a certain way. You can do that. You are sort of you can control your own path, your own destiny in that sense. And so this is very New Year's resolution. Yeah, I understand in February, but better late than never. You can do that. And, don't waste any time. You don't have an infinite amount of it here. So make the jump, take it seriously and start making moves towards whatever it is that you want to do. For me, it's homeownership this year. I'm not going to force myself to do it. If I don't find a house, if the pricing's not right, if it doesn't make sense to do, I'm not just going to buy some pile of shit in an area that I don't like, right? I want chickens, I want yard space, right? I want all of that. So it's got to be the right thing for me to spend that much money and time and effort on it. So, if I don't hit it this year, fine. I'll continue to rent until I find something as I hit the mic that really suits those needs. But I position myself to be able to do that. And I'm actively putting the time and the effort in to sort of see it through to the best of my ability. We're going to be a little short of an hour here, it looks like, as I'm going to go topside from my basement here and start cleaning up the house and getting it ready for guests today. But at least one announcement here. Jackets are live on the site. We're calling them the GPW, short for General Purpose Windbreaker. And I'm calling them that because as it was discovered while we were testing patterns and quality and whatnot, one individual in our chat noted that these things are actually pretty compact. You can roll them up pretty small, and they fit in a GP pouch. So, Jesus, I got to stop hitting the mic. So thus, they were aptly named the GPW. Those are up in AOR2, Frogskin, Desert Tiger, and MO5 Snow. There are 3 across. I think there's only 2 left now. There are 2 blemished, I'm calling them AOR2 variants, I think in medium and large now. Maybe the XL was just bought yesterday. Excuse me. And they're blemmed AOR2 because they are just a little on the, how do I describe it? The color isn't true like AOR2 in that the temperature of it's a little like higher. So it doesn't have that sort of like cool sort of filter over it, if that makes sense. Like take a Minecraft creeper and put it next to AOR2. I think that's how I would describe the blemished AOR2. It's very close though. And honestly, no one's really going to say anything or notice, but I knocked those down a couple bucks and threw them up for sale as well on the site. So take advantage of that if, that speaks to you. But otherwise, the jackets I've kept as cheap as possible. They are being made to order. So there is a bit of a lead time, up to 2-3 weeks on them. But as you order them, they will be being shipped to you directly. So there won't be the huge long lead time as there have been with the pre-orders that I have been hosting. I let those go for way too long. People waited way too long for their stuff. So that's not going to happen anymore with these jackets or anything on the site for that matter, unless I strictly sort of say that they are pre-order items. Shorts are back as well. Just like the jackets, they will be made to order. I brought back the Miami Tiger because that was a huge hit. And the DNC pockets with the chocolate chip shorts are back as well. Adjusted the color on those. The last batch that went out were a little too dark for chocolate chip. So if you did buy the chocolate chip DNC shorts last time and you buy another pair, I'll refund you half of the amount for the shorts that you are buying this go around because the color wasn't spot on enough, I noticed. So that refund will come through. I'll do my own research if you bought them in the past, refund you for this. Just like a thank you for putting up with me and whatnot. And then the buy one, get $10 off still stands for the shorts. That won't be going away anytime soon either. And then if you are in the state of Michigan and you prefer to do pickup, just let me know. I can refund you shipping or give you sort of like a free pickup code if you prefer that as well. There is a new camo way, spoke too soon, for the shorts I threw together because I was feeling a little silly on Friday before the site updated at noon. There is a cow print camo with pink shorts and pink sort of hang them all text on it. And how timely for the hang them all sort of symbiote design that was drafted up. Now I think it's apt. Let's just say I love wearing that shit to the gym now. Some people could read it, most people cannot. So it's a very fun little exercise to explain to them what it says and why it's there now. That makes me chuckle every time now. So yeah, take advantage of the new things on the site. As always, the humidors are still up there. You can still get those laser engraved. That might be it. I'll go through my notes here to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, may go back and add this, but probably not. So I'm going to throw it back in here. This has to do with the propaganda of the most transparent administration in history and sort of the lack of equality in treatment of us and the political elite in the Epstein files. Latvia, the country of fucking Latvia, launched a human trafficking investigation in the wake of the latest Epstein file dump. Not America, not any of the states in America. The country of Latvia launched a human trafficking investigation in the wake of the latest file release. What are we doing? And with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Full Metal Cast, and I hope you have a great Super Bowl Sunday. Until next time, stay metal.